Today I want to spend a little bit of time answering one of those questions that I get asked fairly regularly, and it's a really important question for people who are new to piano improvisation, and it's dead simple. It's this: if I'm playing a given chord sequence in my left hand and I want a solo over the top of it using my right hand, which notes am I allowed to press? Okay, it sounds really simple, and it's a very basic question, but it's a very important question. And I know that one of the things I'm guilty of doing, and lots of other, I hate to use the word expert of myself, but lots of other experts on YouTube are guilty of, is not addressing the really basic questions for people who are just starting out. Yeah, we love to show off and show you fancy techniques, but every now and then it's good to reel back and look at some of the really basic stuff. So the other reason is the answer to that question, if I'm playing a chord sequence in the left, what notes am I allowed to press in the right, is actually more profound and more complex than you might think. Yeah. Let's take the possible answers one at a time. I'm playing a chord sequence in my left hand. Let's say it's this chord sequence. Really famous one. E flat, C minor, A flat, B flat. Which notes can I press in the right hand to help me form a solo? The simplest answer to that, and in many ways the truest answer to that, is any of them. Yeah? The whole point of improvisation is that you are completely free to do whatever you want. If you want to do this, then that's fine, okay? You might not want to do it in a concert, yeah, if you're performing for other people, but if you're practicing and improvising and experimenting by yourself, actually that kind of thing, just playing random notes over a chord sequence, is actually quite a good technique, because it frees you up, it loosens you up, yeah, and it helps you to experiment and find interesting and distinctive sounds. The key point I'm trying to make there, and this is a really difficult one to get over to anybody who's learning the piano, but particularly to people who are learning to improvise after a background of classical lessons, is that there are no such thing as right and wrong notes. Yeah, if you're playing something like this, yeah, if someone puts a piece of Mozart in front of you, then yes, there are right and wrong notes, because you know the composer has an intention and you follow it. And if you press a D flat when you should be pressing a D, then it's wrong. But when you're improvising, there's no authority there saying you must press this note, you must press that note. So the most basic principle is play whatever the hell you like. Yeah. Of course, if you went along to play in a pub or a bar, or you wanted to join a band and you went along and started doing this kind of thing, then your audition would be very short. So we need to qualify that statement that you can play anything with the point that some notes will sound better in some contexts than others. Okay, there are no right notes and wrong notes, but in whatever context you're working in, some notes will sound better than others. Okay. So now the basic question is, how do we know which notes are going to sound better against any given chord sequence? Okay, again, really basic stuff if you are a little bit along the way to learning about piano improvisation. You've seen a lot of my videos, but again, if you're just starting out, you want to know the basics. Which notes are you allowed to press? The safest and easiest notes are the ones that are identical with the notes that make up the chord you're playing. So if you're playing a chord of E flat, any note from the chord of E flat is fine. C minor, A flat, whoops, B flat, yeah? And again, it's very simple. It's not a bad thing to do. If you have a chord sequence and you're new to improvisation, just fiddle around with the notes on the chord in your right hand, just to loosen up, just to experiment. So that's the first category of notes that will always sound fine in the right hand, in whatever context. Then you need to move on to playing notes from particular scales in your right hand. So the simplest way to do that, imagine we're playing this chord sequence which is in E flat major, is to figure out the scale of E flat major, okay, and just play around with notes from that scale, because whatever chord you play in the left will you, I mean, you know, if the chords go out of the key then it's a bit different, but usually it'll sound fine with any of these notes over the top, more or less. Okay, and again, doing that is a great way of loosening up and a great way of getting into improvisation. But it's not, you know, that's not particularly jazzy. If you went along to a jazz club and started just doing that, you know, you wouldn't last very long. So the third stage, after you've played the notes from the chords and played the notes from the basic scales, is to play around with other scales. Okay. In past videos I've talked about things like the pentatonic scale, which is actually made up of notes that are all in the major scale, but which has a particular distinctive sound and is really good for sort of blues and rock and rhythm and blues and stuff like that. Okay, the great thing about the pentatonic scale is whatever note you play from the pentatonic will always sound absolutely fine against whatever you're playing in the left within that key. Okay? But then there are other scales. The other one I talk about a lot is the blues scale. Whoops. Okay? And it's just a question of learning those scales, experimenting with them over the top of your chords in the left hand, and it'll take a while and it'll be difficult to start with, but feel as free as you like and don't worry about these so-called wrong notes, because there aren't any. In previous videos I've talked about particular techniques for learning improvisation. Okay, my favourite is just to say to people, start on one note. And then go to two, and so on and so forth, building in all the notes of a particular scale. And that's great, and you can find that a very useful way. But the other thing to do is just to play whatever you feel like, aiming for the scales, but not worrying if you play something that sounds, air quotes, wrong, because there's no such thing as a wrong note. And hopefully by the time you've practiced that and practiced that and practiced that, and you go out and play gigs or you go and play in a band, you'll have learnt to play the notes which sound right, okay, in any given particular context. So there we go. Really, really very basic stuff, which, and you know, if you've been following my videos for a while, you might have just sort of switched off halfway through, I don't know. Even if you didn't, it's useful to be reminded of that. If you're really new to my channel, if you know you're just discovering this kind of thing, take all that on board and go and explore. There's quite a lot of stuff out there. If you're unsure about chords and chord progressions and how they work, start off with that and then pick up some of the stuff about getting started with improvisation. I've got a series of videos on starting to improvise 12-bar blues, which is a very, very gentle baby steps introduction to improvisation. And then there's other stuff like comping and arpeggios and all that kind of thing. The trick is to stick at it, yeah. And again, if you're new, not, you know, if you think, oh, this is really hard, and don't just give up. Don't think I haven't got the talent for this. You know, I'm not musical. That's complete rubbish. Yeah, everyone's musical. Everyone can do this. It's just a question of wanting to do it enough. I'm practicing and practicing. I'm really playing around. I'm not caring about what you sound like when you practice. Okay, I say this again and again and again, but it's really important to know what you sound like when you practice. Doesn't matter. It might annoy the people you live with, but you know, buy a pair of headphones or buy them some earplugs. Okay, there we go. Any questions? Stick them in the comment thread. I'm always happy to answer, though I've been getting a lot of questions recently, so if it takes me a while to get back to you, I'm sorry. You might also be interested in my book, which I always like to give a quick plug to, How to Really Play the Piano. There's digital editions, the print edition, and it's got a lot of the basic stuff about chords and things in, so you might find it useful to back up your knowledge of what I'm showing you in the videos. Okay, I hope that was useful. For us, a bit of a vague video, but I think there's one or two things in there that really needed to be said. So if you're one of the people that's been asking me the questions about basic improvisation, I really hope that has gone some way to helping you out. Okay, there we go.